and welcome to the first webcast for the Oregon City Together effort on drug and alcohol abuse for young people. My name is Bill Stewart. I'm a community prosecutor with the Clackamas County District Attorney's Office, and I first want to introduce our primary speaker, Donny Wright, who's a therapist for families and children dealing with drug abuse, who was part of the the Clackamas County Juvenile Court for a number of years, and is a tremendous resource for folks trying to deal with this challenge. I also want to introduce our partners from the Oregon City Together. And Elizabeth, I'll have you start, and please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I am the coordinator for Oregon City Together, and very happy to be working with this project. We're a community level coalition working on environmental level change for substance abuse prevention, and I've been working with this project for a few years, and we've got a few good years coming.
And my name's Jennifer Jardy-Borquist, and I'm the assistant coordinator, and I help Elizabeth with her efforts.
Great. Well, thanks for being here. Donny, I want to start off with a question. There may be some parents out there saying that, you know, it's just pot or a little alcohol. I did that when I was in high school. Why should I be concerned if my kids are using a little pot or alcohol?
There's probably several different ways that you could look at this where the concerns today have changed, as well as just from a child or adolescent development point of view. In speaking to, it's just a little bit of marijuana or it's just a little bit of alcohol. Marijuana specific, one of the things I've been telling the majority of my clients is we are now in uncharted territory with marijuana. With the advent of the oils out there in the distribution process, humankind is now capable of consuming marijuana at a THC level well into the 90s, if not close to 100% THC. And so what we've done in the last couple of years is taken the potency of a substance and exponentially increased it. We don't know what that's going to do. It's too short term to really understand what kind of physiological, mental health, or any other kind of impacts that's going to have on individuals. I can speak to the extent that some of my clients this last year that were consuming high levels of the oils were having pretty darn severe psychological issues, all the way on up to what we believe a couple of hospitalizations. Now, I don't run scare tactics. I'm not saying that everybody who's going to smoke or consume the oils is going to run that risk. But once again, we're in uncharted territory with where marijuana is in a consumption level and culturally and everything else. And so we're not really talking about the same animal that we were when, say, us as parents at this generation, what we were consuming in our generation earlier on. Then you have the developmental aspect of the brain that as a child goes through adolescent development and the brain development, what you place into the brain increases the probability of problems. As that's no different than what it was when we were younger, but at the same point in time, we have a higher awareness around that. The most simplified explanation I can give of that is that during adolescence, the brain is going through its second and final and most aggressive brain development period of a lifetime, brain growth. And if you introduce a substance into it, or you start to practice particular behaviors, the chances that those behaviors or the impacts of that substance on the brain staying there longer term is a much higher probability than it would be at a different point in time. One of the explanations that I give my clients is that the earlier you introduce alcohol into a fetus, so say mom's been drinking a little bit and you introduce alcohol in early pregnancy, because there's a limited number of cells, if one of those cells gets damaged, all the cells that come out of that have the potential of being damaged. And so the later in the pregnancy, if mom's drinking, most of that organism has been pretty developed. And so the impacts of the alcohol on the fetus is probably reduced because most of the cells have already been created. The brain development that goes on in adolescence, those cells haven't been created, they're being created. And so if you introduce substances early into that process, it has a higher probability of causing more problems, staying there longer, or having longer impacts on the body.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that if you use drug or alcohol, if a youth uses those substances, if they use it at 13, versus, say, 16 or 17? What are the differences of that type of choices?
Some of the statistics that I've seen along those lines and the things that I talk with parents about and the approach that I have in my own family is that I've seen research or seen statistics that speak to the massive difference between a child who is consuming substances at age 14 versus waits to do that even up to age 17. So you're looking at about a 3-year difference, that the probability of that individual struggling with substances drops by 75%. So even a 3-year difference. And the reason we believe that, and I think the reason we're seeing it, is that brain development. And so the longer you put that off, the longer the brain can develop, the longer it's healthy, the less toxins or problematic stuff that's going into it, the higher probability that it's not going to take more of that into adulthood, or that it's not going to get, I don't know if I would use the word imprinted for that particular behavior, but it's not going to become solid. And one of the things that we see with neurological processes is that if you use it and you use it repeatedly, it gets stronger. And so say a kiddo at age 13 tries a beer and then doesn't try it again until age 17, I'm not, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, but if you've got the 13-year-old that's drinking alcohol fairly regularly, they're at higher risk because they're feeding that neurological process. They're feeding that experience on a higher level and a higher frequency, which has the probability of, if you use it, it gets stronger. And then in the brain, if you don't use it, we lose it, kind of thing.
And that's true of both alcohol and marijuana?
I believe that we probably have the evidence to show that for just about any single substance. It's hard to differentiate why particular individuals gravitate towards particular substances, and there may be some organic stuff there that we identified later on. I don't think we're real clear on that yet. But if you're using alcohol regularly or marijuana regularly or nicotine or cocaine or anything, it's going to build those processes. Most of the substances are traveling on a fairly similar, what we call the pleasure and reward pathway. And so you're impacting that pleasure and reward pathway, no matter what the substance is. There is some variation within the substances as to exactly how it lights that up. Okay. Like a depressant's going to respond a little bit differently than, say, a stimulant is in that pleasure and reward pathway, yet it's still essentially the same river that they're traveling down.
You mentioned nicotine. I mean, do you put that in the same category as drug or alcohol or marijuana, for instance?
Yeah, I in some ways, from a physiological and a cultural point of view, I elevate it above all the others.
Why?
Nicotine kills more people in the United States than all substances combined, plus homicides, plus suicides, plus car accident deaths. So the toll of nicotine on our medical system and the toll of what causes people, nicotine's wiping out everybody compared to the others. Now, the reason we don't worry as much about it from, say, a treatment point of view or otherwise is that it doesn't impair functioning. And so that's why people will excuse it. Well, it's nicotine. It doesn't make you angry, or it doesn't cause aggression, or it doesn't make you crash your car, and so it doesn't impact the behavioral stuff to the same extent. And so as a culture, I think that's why a lot of it's not as on board or otherwise. So it just depends on how you're looking at it.
Okay.
I'm constantly harping at my clients to quit nicotine, and they know it's usually what I get. So,
one of the things that in my world as a DA, we talk about gateway drugs, and that some of these things, particularly in youth, that cigarettes or alcohol or marijuana can serve as a gateway drug to harder drugs. Does that viewpoint hold any water?
The gateway theory, as it was explained to me, is misunderstood by most of the population. The gateway theory isn't that it propels somebody to the next gateway. The gateway theory, my understanding of the definition of the gateway theory is that you pass through gateways. And let me state this differently. Any individual that, say, has gotten to heroin use or cocaine use or other way has passed through similar gateways. So if you interview individuals that are using heroin on a regular basis, or people that have elevated to the higher end substances, and you ask them, have you ever done nicotine? almost all of them are going to say yes. So most heroin individuals have passed through the gateway of nicotine and passed through the gateway of marijuana and alcohol, that they've tried or they've used those things previously to those later substances. And so someone might say, well, what's the gateway to marijuana? Well, the gateway to marijuana probably is nicotine. You know, that most individuals that have smoked marijuana have tried nicotine at some point. And so it's not that the gateway theory is if you do this, you're going to go to the next one. There's some validity in that concept. It's just not, for me, it's not labeled as the gateway theory. There's validity in that concept because if I learn to consume something and I get particular results from it, I've learned that if I consume something, something else can happen. And so I will be more likely to try and consume something or to run the same approach to get the same results and possibly with another substance. So if I learn that smoking does a particular thing for me, or smoking nicotine, I've already learned the route of ingestion, so I'm more likely to use that same route of ingestion for another substance.
So in effect, these are indicators of potentially risky behavior continue to increase.
Yeah. We are phenomenal creatures. We learn and we remember. And we remember the positives more than anything. And so if I learn a particular behavior and it gives me a good response, I don't forget that. And then I'm going to want to see if I can open that up into other similar behaviors to get similar responses.
So as a parent, and I have 3 teenage boys, what sort of signs should a concerned parent be looking for about possible abuse or use of drugs or alcohol?
You know, I get asked that all the time, and the standard kind of answer is you look for changes in your child. And then the standard response from parents is there's changes every 3 seconds in my adolescent child. What are you talking about?
Right.
Well, I'm looking for the more extreme changes, the more consistent changes. You know, is the kiddo who was typically fairly outgoing, fairly active, fairly involved in a fair amount of things, are they starting to slow down or shut down a lot? Are they isolating more? Are they not reaching out as much? Are their energy levels consistently different? Above and beyond just the normal chaos, storm and chaos of adolescence. And what I really believe in answering parents is trust your gut. Your mama, your papa, you know your child. And I think all of us as a parent that's paying attention to our child will get those feelings. And we're like, something's not quite right. You know, and what is it? But typically it's the change in patterns, change in behaviors, and it's just not the small ones, but you're looking for a little bit of larger stuff. There's the standard, they're tired all the time, or their mood swings are more or amplified more than they usually are. You know, the fascinating thing with marijuana that I've seen in the 12 to 14 male range, ironically, they become more aggressive. You'd think stoners would be less aggressive, but I see a lot of aggression.
These are 12-year-old to 14-year-old kids.
Yeah, the 12 to 14-year-old boys.
Wow. Okay.
Typically, one of the first complaints is a parent will bring them in and my son can't manage his anger. And my automatic thought there is, well, is there depression going on? Because, you know, typically that's a form of expression of depression. And I'm wondering, well, is there some marijuana use that's going on as well? Because I think it's the rebound effect. They'll get intoxicated on marijuana, shuts down the stress, reduces concern, totally mellows them out, and then kind of the equal and opposite rebound effect when they're not intoxicated anymore, or if they've been using enough, maybe they're going through a little bit of mild withdrawal, and then you see they have a hard time regulating their emotions effectively.
So if a parent sees those signs, what should they do?
You know, I think the best thing to do is, it really kind of depends on the family culture. Some families, my first recommendation would be talk to your child. Talk to them. You know, inquire, see if you can get anything out of them. See if you can help identify, you know, what's going on with your life, what's going on with your world. It's the first inquiry with the child. In some families, the kiddo will start to talk to you. Other families, the kiddo's not going to say anything, they're going to hide everything, or they're good at telling the parents what they want to hear, and so then the parents just kind of dismiss it or otherwise. One of the things you can always do is you can always consult with somebody in the profession that I'm in. There's a lot of resources out there. I answer a ton of phone calls and just answer questions for parents. You can call the county crisis line and get a clinician on the phone and say, hey, I got a couple questions for you. So you can reach out to other professionals that could help you figure out what process do you want to go with this, how concerned are you, what are you seeing, you can do that. You can also take them into an agency and you can get an evaluation done. Personally, I think the number one value of an evaluation is the UA, the urinalysis collection. Because you take somebody in and they feel like they're on the hot spot and they're worried about being in trouble for something, they're not going to be honest.
Okay.
And just about every evaluation process is going to look into the body. And my response to parents is, if you really want to know what's going on, you get a UA. Or you go into the body and you take a look and see if something's there.
Okay.
And then you've got an awareness or understanding, yes, there is something in the body or there isn't. And then how do we want to go with this or what are the next steps?
Okay.
So there's a wide range. There's a lot of resources out there, within agencies or individuals in private practice or things like that. And you can consult with family or other people. Hey, I'm kind of seeing this stuff. Am I crazy? Have you seen any of this? Have you noticed changes in your nephew or whatever, and get additional validation or support in brainstorming as to what you want the next steps to be.
What experience have your clients had with actually reaching out to parents of their friends to try to get some feedback that way?
It runs the wide spectrum, and I think a lot of it depends on what every individual parent's belief and value around substance is. And so it could be that you reach out to one individual and they're like, yeah, he's totally smoking weed. Why are you talking to me about this? I smoke weed every day. What's the big deal? He's 17 years old.
Right.
Of course he's smoking weed. Look at him, to, oh my gosh, that's not okay. Yeah, I've seen some of this too. How can I support you through this? It really runs the wide range, and it gets back to what is that parent's value or belief around substances, both for themselves, typically for themselves, and then as well as for others around them.
Great.
So I've seen it run the full spectrum.
And
Great.
what would you say to parents who say, I'd rather have them drink at home because it's safer?
I've thought a lot about different ways to do it. I can give crass examples, which I'll try and steer away from that. There's a couple of things that are problematic with that. Yes, in some ways, absolutely 100% you are reducing risk with allowing the child to consume in the house and not allowing them to leave. You reduce the risk of a DUI that night. Right. You reduce the risk of problems that night. You reduce a lot of issues if you're supervising that night. The problem with this is that the child becomes comfortable with the behavior. Mm-hmm. The child also believes that the behavior is okay on some level. Mm-hmm. And that increases the probability that they're going to do it in other environments. The one research study that I saw on that a few years ago, when I was receiving that question a whole bunch, it wasn't in this country, but I do think that culturally we're similar enough and that you could go cross countries. Australia, they were doing research on this, pretty comfortable alcohol culture, and taking a look at researching the kiddos and following the kiddos are the ones whose parents allowed the home parties, allowed alcohol consumption in the homes. Those individuals that were allowed to do that had a much higher probability of abusing alcohol outside of the home. Mm-hmm. And we think it's because of that comfortable piece, because of how the adolescent brain works, that, well, if my parents are okay with this, et cetera, as well as the concept of they're practicing it. Mm-hmm. And so they're getting more comfortable with it. They're getting more controlled in their substance use. Mm-hmm. They're learning how to manage it better. They're not rookies anymore. And so then they're going to start to apply those behaviors out in the community because they feel okay and comfortable and they don't perceive it as a risk. And so, yes, in that moment, lots of great risk reductions. I tend to be, especially from a parenting point of view, I want to pay attention to the moment, but I want to play the tape all the way through.
Right.
And my daughter's 12, my son's 14. I'm thinking about what they're going to look like when they're 21, what they're going to look like, when they're 14 and a half, 12 and a half. I want to pay attention to all of that stuff and what are the messages that I'm sending, and I want to be consistent.
Right.
And that's hard, especially as they get older, because we start to interact with our kiddos differently. And for me, I go back to the consistency of what's the message that I'm trying to send. And real super quick, the way that I do it in my family is value-based parenting, 3 core values. You stick to those values, and that's what everything is referred to. Then you're able to remain consistent. And so if my child violates one of my core values, they're disciplined in an effort to try and teach them. And also to send the message, it's not okay within my clan. We don't do this. And then if they do something of the values that are positive, then I want to positively reinforce that so they're likely to continue to do those behaviors in an effort that no matter developmentally where they're at or how they're presenting, I'm able to consistently go back to that same message and that same value.
Great. Unfortunately, we're starting to get close on time, I think. Elizabeth, can you share with people if they want more information about Oregon City Together or about how to get more information to support some of the effort that we've talked about here, how should they go about that?
Yeah, well, the coalition is definitely available as a resource to the community. Oregon City Together's website is octogether.wordpress.com. And that's a great way to just tap in and see what we're up to. We've got a lot of good things going on, kind of working at all these different levels, the environmental level, but also providing direct resources to youth and parents and through the schools. We've got great partners in the community. It's a great community to be offering this kind of resource. And so we're always looking for folks who are interested in either getting more information and just letting us be a support, but also, want to help out and be a part of it.
Great, great. Donny, any last words of advice to parents out there struggling with this before we close?
It's a process. It's a process. I think like anything else as a parent, sometimes in the process we're going to find great success. Sometimes we're going to beat our heads against a wall, and it's a process. And then, my encouragement to parents is to look at it that way. That a single event isn't necessarily worth going ballistic and totally freaking out about. At the same time, you don't want to ignore it and keep in mind, I'm thinking down the road. This is an ongoing discussion. This is an ongoing parenting piece, like any other parenting component. And to just be prepared that it's a process.
Oh, great. Well, as usual, when you and I get together and I listen to you, I actually get frightened, but I also get inspired. So thanks very much. And thanks for joining us today.